Ladies and gentlemen, another day in Retard Dunistan with more retarded news. But before we get on to the main news stories of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. As you know, guys, it really does help. So let's actually get on to our first news story. And the first one is actually good news for a change. And that is Sakeliga's judgment against the Air Service Licensing Council. And it's worthwhile reading out exactly what's happened. So, the BEE Act is set aside and declared unlawful. The criteria set out is unlawful. Race-based requirements are unlawful. Nothing else to say here. Well done, Sakeliga. You did us proud, my guys. And if you haven't already supported Sakeliga, you really need to go. I mean, this is the kind of work you can't even pay for. So let's move on then to the next news stories. And this is the news stories that, according to the US, specifically some politicians in the US, those who are going to be sanctioned or targeted for sanctioning underneath the new US bill are, according to them, obvious. Now, according to the latest developments, as you all know, the US House Foreign Affairs Committee approved H.R. 2633, the bill, named the U.S.-South African Bilateral Trade Review Act of 2025, which was introduced by Republican Ronnie Jackson. Now, the bill calls for a full assessment of diplomatic, trade, and military relations with South Africa, and specifically aims to identify senior South African government and ANC officials for potential sanctions. Now, as you know, the legislation cites South Africa's growing engagements with countries that the US considers to be adversarial, namely Russia, China, and Iran, as well as its association with Hamas. Now, additionally, Pretoria's involvement with the ICJ case against Israel and its decision to downgrade its ties with Taiwan are all noted in support of the bill. Now, Joshua, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a vocal proponent of the bill, referred to it as so obvious which ANC leaders would be targeted. And to be honest with you, I don't want to spoil the fun. So you know what I want to do? I want you to comment in the comment section below which politicians you would like to see being sanctioned up the wazoos, because I think he's kind of right. If you say who you think will get sanctioned, yeah, it's probably that person. So let's move on then to the next news story. And this is the news story about the general. Remember the general that went to Iran and basically put his foot into it by declaring support for Iran, even though South Africa doesn't want to do that right now because we're trying to negotiate relations with the US. Well, the EFF, remember the EFF? They were the ones who, at Trump's meeting with Ramaphosa, were singled out as being the ones who were singing Kill the Boer. You remember those guys? Yeah, well, they've come out and they've issued a public statement which says that according to them, they slam Cyril Ramaphosa's timid response to the US's criticism of the general. Now, the EFF condemns the US demand for an explanation, and according to the EFF, they categorize the US request for clarification over the general's visit to Iran as preposterous and arrogant, arguing that South Africa does not owe any explanation for its sovereign military diplomacy. Right? Doesn't. But if you want to take that approach, then you're pretty much not going to have any trade with that country, which will screw you economically. And anyway, the party also condemns what it views as political interference with the military. Now, the EFF spokesperson asserts that the trip was planned in 2024 and should not be dismissed as a reckless maneuver amid temporary US-Iran tensions. Temporary, yeah, I'm not sure it's temporary in this current guise. Like, Iran and the US have been at each other's throats for some time. That's a bit like saying, you know, the whole situation between Gaza and Israel is like temporary. The EFF accuses Ramaphosa of downplaying the visit to appease US concerns. Yes, because Ramaphosa understands that there's a lot economically on the line here, and he knows exactly that if unemployment continues to rise in the way that it is, it's going to lead to forms of unrest, which ultimately could see him underneath a guillotine. You know, this has happened before. This is exactly how coups and military juntas occur in Africa. You just have stupid amounts of unemployment, and no real plan to rectify it. So the EFF's comments themselves are, well, stupid. But the chairperson suggests that this reflects a pattern of cowardly behavior by Ramaphosa, referencing a prior White House meeting where, in the party's view, the president failed to assert South Africa's independence. Yes, because you can't go into the front of the world singing Kill the Boer and telling everybody else to footsack like you do, Juju. That's why you like all the other countries have banned you from going there. And then you sit in the corner and cry yourself to sleep. Why does nobody like me? Nobody likes you because you're a retard. In any case, moving on to a news story that I know you're really going to enjoy. And that is the news story around the Grand General Inquiry into MTN. This is the news story of the alleged support for violence acts that resulted in deaths of Americans and Israelis. So you may be looking at that and saying, well, what's that all about? Well, the grand jury proceedings are due to be held in secrecy and are highly likely to result in indictments. Approximately 98% of cases prosecuted in this manner lead to charges. So before we even get onto the fun, let's understand that this whole grand jury probe isn't just for fun. This isn't South Africa. This is a US inquiry into MTN for supporting violent acts. All of these type of things before have resulted in 98% of cases being prosecuted. It's really important to understand that. So what's going on? Well, in Afghanistan, MTN is accused of paying protection money to Taliban-linked militants in exchange for securing uninterrupted mobile network operations. Now, these funds are alleged to have been used in attacks that killed US servicemen. In Iran, MTN, 49% ownership of Irancell reportedly funneled billions of dollars to entities connected to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the Ministry of Defense, both designated a terrorist organization by the US, which allegedly contributed to attacks on Americans and Israelis. Now, MTN faces several risks, including criminal indictment, crippling fines, exclusion from US markets, and asset seizures. There's also the likelihood of personal criminal liability for former or current MTN directors and even shareholders. And one is reminded, Ramaphosa was a chairperson of MTN at some point. Now, for investors, particularly institutional ones like South Africa's Public Investment Corporation, the probe poses reputational threats and potential financial exposure, which could actually take down the PRC. Now, banking institutions and global partners may terminate their relationships with the PRC and cutting off any forms of financial or operational channels to the PRC. So, MTN confirms that it is being contacted through US legal counsels and is cooperating with the probe, and it maintains that its operations were compliant with legal standards. But we don't believe that now, do we? Now, there is actually a report that came out by the National Security News, which actually looked at the grand jury investigation. And according to this report, the investigation will reveal the full extent of the illicit partnership between Ramaphosa's ANC and Iranian generals and their proxies. It also places the generals' visits with Iranian generals who directly control MTN, Irancell, and its profits in an entirely different light. The grand jury investigation explains why Jonas was rejected as Ramaphosa's choice as his special envoy to the US. Jonas was already under criminal investigation by the US Justice Department when Ramaphosa nominated him as a special envoy, because that's just how retarded our president is. And I must say, the story of this general by the day just becomes better and better and better. And the chances that Ramaphosa at this point in time gets sanctioned or criminally summoned or something like that is just getting higher. Now, if you watched my interview with the advocates in the United Kingdom, Justin, then this would all come as no surprise, because he said all of this was going to happen. And it is, exactly as he said. And some of you who commented on there saying it was all conspiracy theories, well, yeah, you know the difference between a conspiracy theory, right? A conspiracy theory and a fact. Roughly around 6 months. In any case, let's move on to the next news story. And this is the news story of the Lieutenant General in KZN. Now, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's the one who was responsible for making the accusation around the police minister and his involvement with the interfering that was occurring around the investigations into political killings. as you know, there is a commission of inquiry currently going on to his allegations into the corruption and criminal syndicate infiltration in the criminal justice system, and this will all begin with public hearings on the 1st of September in Pretoria. Now, the commission is due to be chaired by a constitutional judge and was established by President Ramaphosa to investigate claims by the commissioner, who accused the police minister, Senzo, of interfering with investigations, including disbanding a police political killings task team. Now, this commission will investigate various institutions, including SAPS, Metro Police and the Gauteng Metros, MPA, SSA, the judiciary, corrections, and so forth, to determine potential corruption and infiltration by criminal groups. Now, an interim report is expected in 3 months, aimed at guarding presidential or institutional actions, which we all know will be. Ramaphosa ignores the living daylights out of it, says it will be given his utmost priority, and then he'll just keep doing what he always did. In any case, Parliament's SAPS committee also acknowledged that the KZN Police Commissioner may be the first to testify, and the terms of reference were finalized in August. But if only it was that simple, because according to other news, it's alleged that a lot of the investigations and all the inquiries will occur behind closed doors, with the ANC's chair basically being the one who will control what evidence goes in and out of the actual committee. So it looks already very much like the ANC are attempting to orchestrate a cover-up before we've even started. But this is the ANC way, though, isn't it? Set up an inquiry, control the inquiry, and make sure that nobody ever knows a thing about it. So coming then onto the final news story of today, that is the KZN Police Commissioner, the hero one that we just referred to. Yep, he's also made other allegations, and he has attributed South Africa's rising unemployment rate to trade unions' persistent demands for higher wages. He argues that increased salaries result in fewer available funds to hire workers, including police officers, thereby exacerbating job losses. Now, the police commissioner also highlighted a specific impact that despite a growing population in KZN, the number of police officers have been declining because unions push for salary increases, which limit hiring capability. Yeah, this is pretty much true, and he's concerned about that because he sees on the ground exactly what happens when they have no police officers. And we've also seen how the unions themselves resulted in Goodyear shutting down its plants in Sakeliga because of wage pressures, which contributes to the business decisions to downsize or close the business. And I have a video coming out on that on Sunday. In typical fashion, the unions countered this and stated that decades of near-liberal austerity and budget cuts were actually to fault, and that there was not wage demands, and that the real drivers behind declining police numbers and worsening unemployment are austerity. Yes, these guys are retarded. And Kusato expressed disappointment at the police commissioner's remarks and warned that they risk sowing division between law enforcement and organized labor. The union emphasized that combating crime requires adequate resources, leadership, and mutual respect between these sectors. No, it doesn't. Combating crime requires expertise on the floor, basically investigating crimes. Unions are immaterial to this entire thing. In fact, unions quite often are the ones perpetrating the crimes, but that's just my opinion. Do let me know what you think of all these news stories in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.
Mr. President, I, like Tintswalo, am democracy's child. Born 97, I dare say you are not an honorable man. Your presidency and leadership lack compassion. Mahlong a hao baithuti ba naha ena a se batho.
Sorry, Mma, will you withdraw this? Honorable members, please. Yes, will you please withdraw?
Honorable Speaker, mahlong a hao baithuti ba naha ena a se batho. Mme di riti tsa rona ha di bohlokwa ho hang.
Honorable member, you are not withdrawing. Puma, leave the house. Yes, leave. Leave the house. Leave. Leave the house.